Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to stand in this House tonight as a member of the official opposition, as a representative of the good people of Dartmouth Cole Harbour. This is a serious issue, whether or not to send Canada's military women and men into harm's way. And it's a difficult issue. It's also a complicated issue, Mr. Speaker, and I hope I can add something to this discussion, a discussion which is being held not just in here, in this House, but in the pages of our newspapers and around kitchen tables all across the country. You see, Canadians are very concerned about the decision this government is making because they know this is not just a question of if we should send 6 jets to fight for 6 months. They understand that this is a decision about whether we commit our military to a prolonged, expensive, and deadly war. Mr. Speaker, this may be a global issue, but as a member of Parliament, my first thoughts, my first responsibilities are to my constituents. You see, Dartmouth Cole Harbour is home to a large number of women and men in the armed forces, as well as countless veterans and reservists. For them, their families, their friends, this is not a theoretical debate. These are decisions that change their lives and the lives of their families forever. They know this because many of them are still struggling with the aftermath of other decisions the government has made on their behalf. So it's difficult for them on the one hand because they are the embodiment of loyalty, of honor and commitment. You see, if we ask them to go, Mr. Speaker, they'll go without a second thought because that's what they do. That's what they're trained to do, and they're trained very well. They're the best in the world. On the other hand, these same Canadians are on the front lines of another battle, a battle with their government for the help they need after they come home. In my community, we have members like Major Marcus Brower, who teeters on bankruptcy because the government has not honored its commitments to him and his family. We have veterans with PTSD, like Medrick Cousineau, who walked all the way to Ottawa to raise money for service dogs. We have great Canadians like Dennis Manouge, who led a years-long battle for pension benefits clawed back from disabled veterans. See, when these are the experiences of so many people in my riding, people who have dedicated their lives to their country, it's a stark reminder that although the Prime Minister can talk in terms of months, I know that for many, the decision to enter this war will last a lifetime. And Mr. Speaker, I'm deeply troubled with how the government is framing this issue. You see, they suggest either you are for airstrikes because you care and you want to do something, or else you don't support airstrikes because you don't care and would rather do nothing. It's outrageous. You see, if that were the case, the government would be accusing Germany of doing nothing. Do they call Norway cowards, or do they say that Italy and Italians simply do not care? See, they are all allies who are deeply involved in providing aid and who have all rejected airstrikes. Of course we don't say those things because it's insulting, it's clearly untrue, and such gross oversimplification simply diminish us all. Regardless of your position on this motion before us, I believe that we are duty-bound to acknowledge how complicated, how dangerous, and fraught with risks this situation truly is. I would suggest that no clearer example can be found in terms of how complex it is than to consider the role of Syria. Witness the moral knots our Prime Minister is tying himself in, trying to explain how he would deploy our military assets against Assad's enemies, but only at the request of that brutal dictator. Can also look to the campaign in Libya, where many analysts agree that our overreach in bombing that region has added more fuel to the fire. Mr. Speaker, I don't believe Canada should participate in these airstrikes. But that doesn't mean I don't understand or respect those people who would make a different decision. I believe they are compelled to support entering this war out of compassion for the victims of ISIL, or out of rage at their atrocities, or out of fear in response to the threats made against our country. Intelligent, compassionate people disagree on what we should do. I can appreciate the impulse to join airstrikes aimed at people who have done terrible things, not just with impunity, but seemingly with delight. It offends every fiber of our being. It provokes anger and outrage and disgust. I understand that. I feel it too. But these strong emotions, I believe, are not the frame of mind in which we should make such decisions. We all agree that something must be done. But what? As the Minister of Foreign Affairs said himself yesterday, and I quote, "The scale of the humanitarian crisis is truly hard to comprehend." And he said, when we look at a humanitarian crisis of this size, there is always more that can be done. I completely agree, Mr. Speaker, because the millions of internally displaced people, women and children, matter. Because the victims of the horrible atrocities ISIL is committing matter. And also because how we respond matters. Now, some are caught up in the notion that the only way to deliver peace is with bombs, when really I believe it's not that simple. Mr. Speaker, this is an enemy that doesn't think like we do. They invite the attacks. They crave the violence. In fact, they're counting on it. As I said earlier, we cannot underestimate how complicated this situation is, and certainly no one can say what the future will bring. But it's becoming increasingly clear that in this case, more violence will not suppress the violence. Attacks will not dissuade attacks, and killing will almost certainly lead to more killing. Mr. Speaker, this is complicated, and as I've said, we do know some things. We know that deploying 6 CF-18s will lead to a greater level of engagement, sometimes known as mission creep. We have good reason to believe the value of such airstrikes is dubious. We certainly know from experience the cost of waging war is enormous, not just to our Treasury, but to the physical and mental health of the Canadians that we deploy, not to mention their families. And we know that there are 5 million and counting internally displaced people who need immediate assistance. Now, that's an area where Canada can and should do more. It's a task where heavy lifting is truly required. Yesterday, the Foreign Minister asked if we should, quote, stand with our close allies or stand aside as they put themselves on the line, unquote. That's a false dichotomy, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister should be ashamed for diminishing the risks taken by each and every person who is sent there to help in whatever capacity they have. Make no mistake, humanitarian efforts in that region are not for the faint of heart. It's a job that will put Canadians in harm's way. It's also a job, I believe, that better reflects who we are as a nation. I think we all agree this is a problem that is not going away anytime soon, certainly not in 6 months. It will take a long time, but that is what pulling your own weight is really about committing time, the money, resources that are needed for the long run. Mr. Speaker, it is for those reasons that I implore this House to vote in favour of the amendments proposed by the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition. His amendments recognize that strong and direct force is absolutely necessary to confront ISIL, but that it must come from capable and enabled local forces. It calls for military support and the transportation of weapons where needed and for assistance to investigate and prosecute war crimes. It calls for monthly updates on the cost of our mission, and it wholeheartedly supports the brave men and women of the Canadian Armed Forces who stand on guard for all of us. Perhaps most importantly, it calls for a significant boost in humanitarian aid in areas where there will be immediate life-saving impact, including contributing to winterized camps for refugees and investing in water, sanitation and hygiene, health and education for people displaced by the fighting. Mr. Speaker, you've indicated my time is drawn to an end. I want to thank you for the opportunity on behalf of my constituents to come here tonight and to share some of my views, to share the opinions of some of my constituents. Thank you.